Welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I am your host, Kieran. And this episode is a continuation of a conversation that I guess honestly didn't feel finished the first time. Last time I had Patty on the podcast. That was episode 165. Nobody talks about the joy. And we were unpacking the inner world of children of immigrants, to which both Patty and I have a lot of experience as. So we talked about the guilt, the obedience, the emotional patterns, the transactional conditioning kind of reward system that we grow up with, and how all of these experiences can shape and do shape us into adulthood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And since the underlying theme to that convo was identity and how we build it and how we evolve with our identity over the years, we were both hoping to touch on something we both have experience with, interracial relationships. And what it actually means to raise kids who are navigating that biracial world. So race, culture, belonging, in all these sort of layered ways. So here we are back at it today. And maybe I'll just recap. Patty is an Indian psychologist and writer currently working on a book exploring the emotional world of children of immigrants. Patty is also in what I would describe as a true interracial relationship. So we have a brown woman with a black man raising black and brown kids in the US. Can it get any more real in that context? And then I also, in this moment before Patty and I start talking, want to name something intentionally here. So none of these conversations, including this one, right, is to compare or rank experiences. I think it's important to say this because interracial relationships are not all experienced in the same way. There are different dynamics depending on race, history, power. So when two people of color get together, in Patty's case, a black and brown couple, identities in this context, as well as like lived experience, is different from relationships where a white person is in partnership with a person of color, like in my experience. So here, I would agree with what people say in the articles that say that that's not really an interracial relationship because there's historical and structural power dynamics that shape this reality. So does not matter the gender of the white partner in the relationship, but the fact that they come from a place of power, there's a bit of a difference than when two people of color come together. And I'm not saying this to like simplify anything, but to acknowledge that these conversations exist within systems and really not outside of them. So I think I'm with a white man, Patty's in an interracial relationship. At the end of the day, we have kids that are biracial. And this is why we're getting together today to continue this conversation. So having biracial kids, and honestly, like really raising children around this race, culture, identity forces deeper conversations about the identity and privilege, belonging, and how all of that shapes us in the world that comes to the door and sees our kids in the way that they choose to see our kids. And I think this is like not in theory. So we're not talking about being intellectual and as partners having head conversations. We're talking about heart conversations. We're talking about real time. And I'm always cautious to like lay down my opinion. But in this case, with my experience, I honestly think it is so responsible for couples that are coming together with different races. There's a huge responsibility in getting to know what that entails when and if you have kids, because the impact actually is on our kids. They're the ones that have to navigate these identities and these in-betweens. And I think a lot of this has been coming up for me because in comparison, but like not really, because I don't want to take away from biracial people's experience. I sometimes wonder like how much children of immigrants and biracial children kind of experience some similarities. Like we grow up navigating a lot of in-betweens, making up our own kind of rules, and people see us in very different ways. You're not one, but then you're also not the other. And again, not in identical ways, but in ways that raise similar psychological questions about identity, about belonging, and how much of yourself you have to translate just to be understood. And so as I've been navigating my own interracial stuff, my internalized racism, all that stuff has been sort of coming together. There's layers there. There's these different intersections that I keep feeling like I'm finding myself at. So I'm really glad to have Patty here today, because today's conversation is about interracial relationships, but then what comes out of it when you have kids, and how do you have a responsibility to teach your kids to understand the world that they're growing up in. So welcome, Patty. Thank you for coming back. Do you want to add anything to my little intro there before we get started?
I think it was so comprehensive. The one thing that sticks to my mind is the different components of like each person's role and responsibility in the relationship and in the family, to understand, like, there's layers of understanding our own identity and our identities in this family dynamic. And so there are just layers and layers, and like we'll talk about some of those layers, but just everybody having that responsibility to understand. I mean, even the child at a certain age having the responsibility of like, I want to know and understand who I am, all at the same time, while you have like, you're combating racism, you're combating like all of the messages you were taught about who you are as an adult and now a parent, as well as the things that you're breaking down that are not you.
Yeah.
And coming closer to work on your own identity while raising children and helping support them building their identity and the complexities of biracial families. So
I think that's well said. I think what I hear you saying is, in my case, my husband and I have the ultimate responsibility because we're building this family and we're bringing kids that are white and brown. If we don't get clear, and if we don't do the work and continue to do the work and like, what does this mean? Then we're not going to be able to help the rest of the family members show up too. So the aunts and uncles or grandparents and all of that. So you have community and outside world that's going to be nasty or say, oh, you don't look brown, or you don't look black, you don't look white, you see more this. But what happens with the influence of your actual family is so important. And I think sometimes that's sort of where a lot of us couples get stuck at, because our families have such different understandings and a lot of racism as well between each other too. So I think it starts with us, but there has to be work that we have to be willing to stand up, whether it's to the grandparents or whether it's to the aunts and uncles or whoever those family members are. Because if we can't get it right, then who cares what the community says, you know, when your own family members are saying you're not black enough and you're not brown enough and you're too white, or whatever it is they may or may not say. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think we will get into that, because we're two women, brown women, who are children of immigrants. So naturally, we come with a layered version of our family dynamics and closeness, not closeness, all of that kind of stuff that happens for us growing up. So we're bringing a lot of that in. And then, you know, we have our partner's version of that too, to some degree. So I usually ask the time machine question, but I already asked you that last time. So I'm going to ask you, when I was putting this together, I was like, okay, so maybe we can start with like a welcome question of like, when you think about where you are right now in your relationships, whether it be with your partner, your kids, yourself, your work, your writing, you're a psychologist, you have all these different hats you wear day to day. What feels like the biggest question you are currently holding around identity and relationship?
within myself.
Well, it could be yourself, or it could be with your kids. It could be in general. I've been thinking about this on my end, but for me, it's like with my kids.
I think it is because my children are adults now and have they have their own lives. And I think about like, what did we as a couple as their parents, really like introduce them to all of the ways that they could understand their identity and like where that has, and I would love to ask them this actually as you're asking me. We think about things, but sometimes like it's like, oh, I could say that. But like how we helped shape their identity and like, what are the holes? Sometimes I wonder like what more could I have done? Not in like guilt-ridden way, but like it with curiosity, what more could I have done, or what more could my husband have done to really like help them build on their identity? Because there are, I would say, a lot of ways that we both like introduce them and like really had them like living a life of a true like biracial experience as much as possible, and like teaching them and sharing history as much as we knew about it, and introducing them to as much family that we possibly could, and like telling those stories, family, sharing about culture in different ways. But then I also like that also, it brings me to this other question of, as a couple, like how much did we really, we've integrated our different cultures, but I think it's like, how do you honor the other person's identity and background well over the course of time?
Yeah.
So I think that's like, it led me to a bigger question than any answers here, but like those are the things that I have been pondering.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that too. Like I've been wondering, same thing, like am I doing enough? Am I and particularly in the realm of, because I have adolescents, so they are literally in the identity forming stages of their life. They're in the pruning, and their brain is taking in a lot, hormones, all this. And I often am like, okay, so for me, am I teaching them the foundation of like self-worth? Because you and I, and a lot of us kids of immigrants, we grew up with that transactional, oh, you got A's on your report card, here's your car. Oh, you did this fantastic thing, let me pay for this huge thing for you. And so oh, you didn't do well, let me take that car back from you. So it was like this reward system of back and forth. And so we're constantly gunning for like, okay, how do I know I did good enough? I didn't get a compliment, I didn't get the external sort of measures coming in. And so how do I teach these guys the self-worth without tying behavior to it? Because you see a lot of people in our generations and younger that have hit that menu of got the job, the lawyer, the doctor, the engineer, the accountant, whatever those high fulfilling jobs our community wants. They drive the car, they got a beautiful partner, that house, all these wonderful things. But then a lot of them haven't been taught how to tie that success to self-worth. So they're still gunning for something else, or it's not enough or whatnot. Like I see this in so many people in our community. And I'm like, I don't want to do that with my kids. And then when you throw in the biracial factor, like they're already like, am I enough? And am I too brown with the white side? Am I too white with the brown side? They're already worrying about those things, and no matter what we do. And so it's like, what does it take? So this idea of self-worth, like where do you think it actually gets shaped in childhood from your psychological work experience? Like what would you say? And even your mom experience, because your kids are adults now.
Self-worth it's just like so many smaller moments, just kind of that comes together, right? It's like this conglomeration of like, what happens when somebody asks you, what are you? Or which one are you more? Identity. Or, oh, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, all of these moments that kids encounter, typically by adults. And I think it's like how they start to see themselves and their self-worth, not exactly what you said, not by performance, not by productivity, but who they are, right? And even in like, although of course their ethnicities, their backgrounds matter, but at the end of the day, like this is a human being with very unique experiences. And it's like what defines who you are is what leads to knowing that leads to a sense of self-worth. So it can be, you can get all the questions externally and you can then internalize them even. I know with me, like, being ambiguous looking, especially when I was younger and like different hairstyles, and people are like, what are you? And that comes from outside, but it also comes from within because you have, my parents started off, oh, you're American. Like, no matter what they tell you, you're just like all the other kids in your classroom. And I'm looking in my classroom and everybody's white. And then I get a little older and everybody's like mostly white, some like Latino, some like, and my parents are like, you are American. Don't let them tell you otherwise. I'm like, all right, I'm American. Yeah. It like changes when you want to do American things. And then your parents are like, you're Indian. We don't do those things. Right. And so like for a kid to kind of struggle on that continuum with like, wait, what are the expectations here? And what do I feel that I am? So like building that self-worth takes so many conversations from parents about like, okay, like somebody asked you this today, or these kids wouldn't let you play because you weren't like, Black enough or Indian enough or whatever enough. Let's talk about that. I remember having these conversations, especially more so with my youngest, who like really wanted to belong with her both of the girls, like, and we live in a quote diverse area, but it's more diverse than your like typical suburb. Yes. But so they encountered like a lot of friend groups who were mostly white and they really want to fit in, and they're coming home tears and like, yeah, like they wouldn't let me play and they would, and it's in those questions of like, is it because I'm blank? It's like, is it because I'm biracial? Or is it because my hair is curly? I've had that from big girls. It's like, is it because I am not cool enough? Is it because I'm, and some of these things are universal, right? There's like all these different ways that kids are trying to fit in and to belong. And it's those conversations that we have with them about, well, like, do you feel it was because of this? Because I mean, parents will sometimes also go lean one way or the other. And I always had my antenna up. I'm like, is it because of how they look? Is it because of their ethnic background? I was like really sensitive about that. And I hated it myself. I was never a biracial person, but I'm a brown person. So I know you're always kind of thinking about that in the back of your mind. But it's like having to gauge that within myself specifically so that I'm not putting my fears onto my children and just allowing them to explore, like, why do you think they didn't include you? And it's like, if it's brought up, it's like, oh, okay, like, is it because you look different? Is it because of your hair? Do you think that could be a possibility, right? Versus like, oh, I know it's because you're brown and you look different. Like, I know it, honey. I know they're being racist. Like that's a different type of, right? Like, to allow them to have the space to explore, and that builds self-worth, because when we're able to ask ourselves questions about why these things are happening versus other people imposing what they think the factors are, it makes a big difference. It gives us that sense of self-efficacy to say, I can figure this thing out, and then I can navigate like what I'm going to do differently or how I'm going to overcome this.
Yeah. I appreciate this part because the underlying take from this is communication is so important as early as possible with our kids. Because we're talking about biracial kids in particular, it's really bringing that curiosity in and asking them, what you're saying is like, help them build their own critical thinking, help them process, what is this? And I think sometimes as parents, we get protective and we're like, oh, it's fine, or you're okay. And we care more about hushing and making our kid feel okay, but they're still left with that internal thing. They still have to go back and face those kids or that situation. So helping them, I think, figure out early on of what is this? What is it just a bunch of mean girls? Is it race related? And I think here is where it's really difficult is when it's white moms that are raising biracial kids, because you made a really good point. You're like, I'm a brown mom. I know my experience myself with racism and whatnot, even though my kids are mixed race. And same here. I'm a brown mom. I also know what all of that entails growing up and can connect with the boys on a different level, especially in my experience, because my husband's white. So he's had a very different life experience. And I think sometimes white moms that are raising mixed race kids, there's like some things that sort of get lost in translation, or they're trying really hard to learn or understand, or aren't catching it. And so I think for whatever gender, whatever race you are, when you are raising biracial kids, the key is like really ask your kids instead of imposing your own stuff on it. And so I don't know if you want to add to that before we move to the interracial part.
I was like, I don't want to interrupt, but yes, I want to say something about that. Absolutely. There's that like minimization, because the reality is, if you're a white person living in America, in Canada, and certain countries, like, you just don't encounter that experience of even having to question whether somebody's treating you differently because of your skin color. It just doesn't cross your mind, you know. For women, sure, it can cross our mind that like, oh, is this person treating me this way because I'm a woman, right? And so we can try to educate in that way, like think about what that might feel. But yeah, if you don't grow up facing that, you really have to do the work of trying to put yourself in your child's shoes. Like, and I have my fear with the dynamic of white mom, brown child, is that minimization piece.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, they weren't being racist. It's like, you just have to be more friendly, or like, you have to like talk more, or like maybe you were being a bully. And I'm not saying like, you know, like all white moms, but we as parents, yes, we become protective, and we're like, okay, like, how can I help you fix it? So like, maybe you need to be more friendly. Maybe you need to be more social. Maybe how can we help you learn how to, you know, up your social skills? But then if you're missing this whole piece where like, yes, they're being excluded because of a skin color, or the curly in their hair, or whatever it might be, like, it's very problematic, and that confuses self-worth. It confuses identity, because eventually what happens too is like, all of that is being shut down. But one day, sadly, that kid is going to hear a racial slur. That kid is going to hear something really hurtful, and they're not going to know where to put it. They're not going to know that it is quite all right. It is more than all right to be who you are, to look how you are, to talk to eat the food you eat. If you haven't heard that, and if you're not aware of that side of it where people do judge based off of how you look and where you're from.
What do you think is the best thing a white mom / dad, or however the parent identifies, non-binary, but if they're white and they're raising a mixed race kids, what do you think is like the best thing that adult could do when it comes to understanding their child's other side, or the race?
Education. Education is so important. Education and immersion. So like, not only like reading books about like how to raise your biracial child, but
101.
Also like education from like other families. Education. Like, I've really appreciated when somebody adopts like an Indian child. They're like, hey, can you work with my child? Can you see my child as a therapist? Because like, I really would like them to get to know the culture, and to, you know, immerse them and make friends with people of both ethnicities who are really going to pull you into the culture, and like, have conversations one-on-one with other adults about like, how do I navigate this? Like, how do I navigate whatever, like how to make this particular food, or like what's just gathering information, immersing, and not making assumptions. You know, it really is about curiosity, and like, and there are also so many like subcultural factors to think about too, and like religious factors, like all of these things that come up. And like, what I mean, I have a family member, very close family member, who's marrying someone of a different religion, and who is also Indian. So my daughter being biracial and her partner being Indian, and they're from different religions. And so that for us is very new. So I'm like, okay, we have to do our research and we have to ask questions and we have to, like, so even with religion, like all the different nuances, how do you immerse yourself into that?
I so agree. And I think if you're a white parent raising a biracial kid, I think the best thing you can do is admit you thing. Like,
Yeah.
get your ego away from the whole thing and be like, I actually know nothing here. And I actually have to learn from my kid, and I have to lean in to their family, their partner, just as you said, because I think a lot of times what happens is like this, oh, but even the grandparents or family members, like, I love the kid and I have so much love, but they're not doing anything to actually educate or learn. And it's so hard to connect, and the kids see it. They see it. And I think my husband in particular, because we've been doing this work, I see him coming around the corner now and understanding that I don't have to get defensive, and it's not like I'm a bad person. It's just I have to understand my privilege, and I'm white. And now that I know this and get it, I can hold on to it as I move forward in this moment or conversation. And when that happens, my kids connect so wholeheartedly with him. They come together and they work through whatever it is. Now it's like man to man kind of stuff. But when it's like, oh, I already know all this, I think there's a huge disservice to the kids. So now let's move a little bit, because I'm with the white person, you're not, and I think there's lots of other things we should talk about here. So maybe we just start at like the interracial relationship thing, the reality, and not the whole romanticizing part of, oh, love is love and look how good looking we look together and all that fake ass stuff that some of us did 30 years ago when we got together. So what do you think people like don't fully comprehend about being in an interracial relationship beyond the love part itself?
So many things, and it actually connects to something I was thinking about in terms of parenting, but each person, it has to learn each other, right? And even in relationships where you have like two, if you have like black and brown, for instance, like there was so much that we had to learn about each other culturally. And when I think about like parenting from the perspective, I'm like, I'm not a black woman, so I'm not going to pretend that I know like what you said was so on point. It's like, I know nothing about living as a black woman, and I'm raising two black women, right?
Yeah.
Two black girls who, and thinking about too, like even saying it in that way, it's like, and I hear my girls identify that way at times, right? Because they're like, yeah, we're fully both, but like, what does it mean to be a black woman in America, to be seen? Oftentimes people are like, oh, you're black and what? So they know, but they also like will identify them as a black woman first. But in the couple dynamic, there's just so much to know. And I think sometimes there's that fear too of like, what if we don't make it because we're culturally so different, right? And people are very curious, are like, does this even actually work? Because they can't wrap their minds around having an interracial relationship. They're like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
It's like, I want like the same background, the same religion, the same, because that makes sense. And in many ways, sure, it alleviates different levels of work you have to do to get to know the person and to understand that this is just me culturally. This is not me imposing any type of personal beliefs onto you. This is like custom that I subscribe by. So like when it comes to things, it could be something small, like, hey, my parents are offering you food, like, better eat it.
Oh yeah. That's a big one, not a small one.
And then he's like, but I'm full. And he's very logical. I'm like, oh no, it's a huge deal. It's like, it can seem to be disrespect. But then navigating that and like hearing him on like how impractical it is to keep eating,
Yeah,
because being pushed to eat. And so like bridging those type of things. And so many things that come up in parenting as well, like learning each other in ways that are unique, because we don't have that like same cultural platform. And I mean, also, sure, given like you can have two Indian people who come from very different subcultures.
Yep.
So that can happen as well. And I have known of like many couples who are like, you know, butting heads because they're like, well, in my culture, in my family, in my tradition. But with interracial relationships, like, yes, like it's like, oh, like this is so cool and so beautiful and so unique. But sometimes arguments and disagreements come down to your tradition versus my tradition versus your belief or your perspective versus my belief. And I think one of the biggest things we have to do is come back to like, okay, like I'm doing this because this is how I was taught to do it. And it has been tradition and the right way to do it. But here I'm faced with thinking about, like, yeah, like, do I want to really push this person to, I mean, you never want to like push your partner to do anything, but do you want to try to like impose these traditions onto your partner when it really doesn't make sense for you as a unit? Like you're united. So really like thinking through those nuances and being willing to, you said something so important earlier. It's like defensiveness. Like, am I getting defensive because I'm protective of my culture and my traditions and you're not understanding why it's so important to me? And there's like two things to pull apart there. It's like, hey, can you do this because it's important to me versus like, well, this is just how we do it in my family or my tradition or my culture. So like coming to the middle and to some type of reasonable agreement that like, okay, yes, like I'll do this part of it because that makes sense to me. And it doesn't go completely against like what I believe in, what is my culture. But like when we think about culture, it's really like about our belief system. It's ingrained into our belief system. So I think doing the individual work of like, okay, how much am I attached to certain traditions, as well as then how do these factors show up in our relationship where we can navigate them in ways that make sense for us, because you're all creating a new culture together, you know?
I'm so with you. And I think where maybe it gets like push and pull is when the kids are there, because when some of this like, people of the same race are like, we have these problems, and you're like, yes, every couple gets to have these problems. But I think where the interracial part comes in is like you are sometimes with subconsciously fighting for your background in some ways. You're not meaning to compete or fight for it, but when you have kids, I think there's this like, again, subconscious thing of like, I don't want to lose my community, my culture, and I want my kids to know it. So sometimes I think as a couple, you're not realizing it, but there's like this back and forth. And when you like, I feel like when I break it down, it's like, oh, I'm being protective and fearful that my kids aren't going to get the Indian experience. And my husband might feel what he feels and like your partner may feel. And I think it's like, we're just trying to ensure that the kids, because even the same race couples have those problems, but their kids are still the race. And they're like, okay, mom and dad are going at it, but at the end of the day, I'm this race, and everyone out there can tell I'm this race most times. But for us, like we're trying to teach our kids, oh yeah, you have this part of you and you have this part of you. So sometimes we complicated ourselves. I'm just thinking this out as you said that. So I don't know if I'm being clear or not.
I think what it is like instinctive survival, right? Or we think it is. We're like, oh, we have to pass on these very important, necessary customs, because if we don't, then that like lineage, that our ancestors, all of that will just like disappear and it won't mean anything. But the reality is, it's like, even when you have a same ethnicity couple, you're still losing some of the traditions that happened in generations before you. That's just the reality. Like, you're never going to keep it intact because tradition is just this ever forming thing, ever moving, ever changing thing. And so, yeah, it really is about thinking about, I mean, it again goes back to like, what's your nervous system doing? What is your body doing when you're becoming defensive about something that you've always done in your family, but it doesn't make any damn sense. It's like, why do we even do that tradition? Really honestly, very honestly looking in the mirror and saying, like, questioning yourself about like, why have we followed this
Yeah.
tradition? Does
Yeah.
it even make sense? Because when we think about how we blindly follow tradition, that sometimes leads to very harmful things too, right? And so like challenge interracial relationships is all about challenging all of the traditions and the things that you did a certain way.
What's a lesson you would say you've learned over the years being in an interracial relationship that has helped you?
Oh, okay, yeah. So that I think this is one of the biggest themes that has gone on in the back of my mind, that I am not the ambassador for anti-racism with my family constantly. Like, do I want to be as anti-racist as possible? Absolutely. But to feel that my relationship absolutely has to work because I have to prove to my family that it will work, because everybody in the family was like, oh, that's not going to work out. Oh, that's really messed up. Like and they were just really just being so terrible. And of course, because I'm breaking tradition. So like a great example of that, them thinking like we have to do it this way. She's breaking tradition. It's not going to work. And so I'm like, yes, the hell it will work. And so like, and that like puts me mentally in a position of not calling out some of the issues in the marriage, which is a terrible way to live out your marriage, suppressing or denying that there are certain things happening that are very problematic.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yes, be anti-racist every day, all the time in your life and in all of your roles, but are you trying to be the ambassador for proving to the world that this relationship will work because it's an interracial relationship? It's like, that's what I had to separate out.
Years ago, I read this article that talked about like the number one thing about interracial relationships not working is the lack of community support. The couple starts to isolate themselves, or they are isolated by their community. And it's exactly what you said. And so then you feel like, yeah, you can't share with people that are in your closeness, maybe part of your ecosystem. Hey, my partner and I are having a hard time, because you're already having to, like you said, prove. And that's like so much pressure to carry and hold on to. So that's a wicked double entendre, I guess. Lesson to learn throughout the years of like, okay, I can't do all of it, and people are going to say what they're going to say regardless. And how do we lean into this? So that's a good one. So anything you want to add to that before we move to the next little section?
Lessons. There are so many. I'm like,
More,
which
yeah.
one
You could write a book on that.
right. Seriously. Lessons being in an interracial relationship. In terms of the relationship, reaching out to parenting, I think like always having humility in parenting. Oh my gosh, humility in parenting, like that's itself. But having humility in navigating like what I don't know still about this person. Like we're always changing and growing, and I think this is like it's. I mean, it can apply to anybody, but especially in interracial relationships, and like thinking like, well, we've been together X amount of time, so I know so much about Black culture, and where the reality is, it's like, no, I don't. Like, I could live a lifetime, and there's still so much to know. And so, like, and I hear this sometimes, like, oh, like, I know about such and such culture because, like, I'm married to this person. It's like, yeah, but like, do you really feel you can speak that boldly for somebody else's culture, ethnicity? Like, I appreciate people saying, like, oh, well, in my experience, which is different, but to speak for a whole ethnicity, I think like that's something where I'm like really understanding different nuances. And I grew up in very diverse neighborhoods, and like that was such a blessing. I loved that, but always remembering, yeah, we are us together, our relationship, our dynamics. We know what we know about each other. We know what we know about like each other's cultures, but there is so much more to know.
Yeah, that's a
And
great lesson.
I
That's like,
feel
white people, note that lesson, please, because that's a huge one of like, yeah, you don't, because your friend's brown and you're white, or your partner's brown and you're white. Like I see this a lot because my experience has been mostly around white people. It's like this golden ticket to knowing everything about the culture and all these sorts of things, and then being like, oh, my brown person said, or brown friend said, or whatever. And
the brown person said is hilarious.
yeah. Yeah, isn't that such a like Freudian or those like psychological slips? My brown person said, literally handcuff me, I am your brown person. That's so funny. That's so funny. That's so good. My brown person. I'm going to use that again. But yeah, like that's sort of what happens, and that sort of, and I think when you are in this like interracial relationship, like you said, you two know your good, bad, and ugly. But when you look at the cultural context, everyone has different versions. And often you get the stereotypical version of it. You know, like if you're with a brown person, you know how to wear the brown clothes and go to the brown parties and eat the brown food. And maybe you feel like you know all of it, but you don't. And as a brown person, I don't even know all of it. So how could you know all of it? And I think, again, going back to what we said at the beginning, like admit you know nothing. No matter how long you've been closely connected to that culture or that religion, you don't know. And for people that use their brown person or their person of color of like, oh, resource, I think that's part of the problem too, is saying, because my friend is this, my partner is this, I know everything. And I agree. I think that's a ongoing work of art that we can all continue to master. And like, I don't know, and it's okay to say that. It's been throwing me off. I might take a little like a scenic route here for a second. But so right now, this is what's happening. There's a lot of South Asian hate. And it's I don't know how bad it is in the US, because there's hate for every person of color there and then some. But here it's right now the South Asians are the golden ones that everyone hates. But then we have, and I don't know if you know of Diljit Dosanjh. He's like a huge Punjabi international pop star and is everywhere. And he's been on Jimmy Fallon, and he's been on these like white pop culture-y interview shows. So, you know, he made it. And now all over TikTok, you have like white women that are like making videos of, oh my God, I need a brown friend because I need me a Diljit Dosanjh, or is it weird that I'm attracted to him? And all these sorts of things that are continuing to occur. And I think a lot of these sorts of things also impact, like I look at this as raising biracial kids and talk to my kids about this, because there is so much going on in this of like, we hate you, but we like these pretty parts of you. And you don't just get to graduate to the top and you want to indulge in a Dosanjh album, then you also need to understand where the Punjabi culture comes from, what's going on for the community, what's happening. You can't just love these sexy parts. And so you just see this reoccurring over and over. It's like new ways that a community gets taken, and now you're relevant again because like the bindi and the henna and the yoga and all those things. So now this guy is the new thing. And it's been bugging me because I'm trying to bring that. My kids are seeing that. They see that all over TikTok. They see all that. And so we're trying to have these conversations about that, because it's like, stay away from people like that who want to embrace these parts of you, but won't show up when those other dark parts need support. And that's sort of the hard way that I learned with white people that were friends and all these kinds of things. And so I'm making a U-turn. I'm coming back now. And I don't know where this sits or not, but it just felt like the moment was like, okay, this is sort of where I'm at with this. I don't know if you want to add to that or not, or
there's that like fetishizing, right? Of like, ooh, like this handsome singer who's popular now. It's like, oh wow, I need some of that. It's like, it's weird. It's like, what is the context of it? And like, there's a side to it where it's like, okay, you can appreciate the culture, you can appreciate the music, you can appreciate the man, you can like want to know more. But there is such a difference. I think that's where people get confused. They're like, oh, I'm appreciating the culture though. It's like, to do that respectfully, you do have to understand the context of it as well. It's like, and yes, like there's a lot of like South Asian hate here in America right now. I mean, when he was elected, it kind of just upped it quite a bit. And like anybody who is rising, like the attempt to like knock them down in some way. Even the singer, they're like, oh, like, he's actually American. He's had American citizenship. It's like, why are you saying it like that? Like that's a bad thing, or that he's lying to you. It's like, who cares, you know? And there's articles about that. Like for what? Very similar to like the sense of anti-Blackness in America, where there's like so much misappropriation and people want to sing the songs. They want to say the N-word very freely and openly and think that that's cute. But it's like, but do you know, like, do you even try to understand the experience of a Black person in America, and like disproportionate all the things, opportunities and redlining, all these things? Like that's when you're really delving into a culture. And that's when a person is sincerely wanting to know and asking honest questions. And one of the things I think about often is like how people ask questions and where their curiosity lies. What are you? Like, is different from, oh, what are you? It's like, where are you from? Versus like, where are you from? Like, you know, I'm curious, like I can't identify, whatever. You can ask the questions, right? Because like, yes, education is important, but like, how do you do it? Why are you asking the question? Think about why you're asking questions, right? Take a step back, reflect on why you even want to know something and how you would feel if somebody asked you that question. For like, the amount of privilege that white people carry, it really is about growing in a different level of empathy, because we're always like, as brown and Black people, are putting ourselves in other people's shoes because we're experiencing it. So when you don't experience it and you have the privilege of not experiencing it, you want to really make an effort, a very serious, willful effort to ask those questions and to reflect first, ask questions later.
I need to tattoo that on my forehead for myself all the time. But that it is true. Like where is this coming from for me before it comes out? And you're right about, I mean, the black culture with music in particular has been so, you know, taken by all of us. And we dance to this music in the nightclubs, but then we have things to say about Black people who are in the moment doing the same thing. And we're like, this isn't even ours. And so where do we have the right to claim this? So and even in South Asian music, there's been a lot of controversy too about a lot of our artists are replicating Black culture in their music as well. And like, is that okay when you have your own community and your own music to embrace? Why do we all want to be Black so bad in all the wrong ways? But then when it comes to your, like you said, understanding history and what it means to be a Black man or woman or person, we're like, well, that's not my problem. So, and maybe we can go there now, like a little bit of raising Black and brown kids. So for you like, what has it meant as a brown mom raising Black and brown girls who are now women in today's world? I know that's that's like a loaded question. So to take whatever little piece of that you want and whatever comes to your mind.
I think it takes me back to the previous discussion we were having about knowing, like thinking you know the culture, your partner, and which also then can translate into thinking you know the culture and experiences of your children. I mean, they're your children, you raised them, you birthed them.
I gotcha.
A little bit of Indian accent coming out somewhere.
Yeah, there you go. Right, so many slips today.
I birthed them. And, you know, you're every day in and out. I know my child. This is my child. However, I think when we talk about lessons, it's like remembering too that like we don't know their exact experience and from their lens. And that's something that I have often thought about as well, am I doing my due diligence and trying to put myself in their shoes, as in their experience, in like the city they live in the state they live in the surroundings that they're in, like their experiences, right? Because I can never say also that like I fully know my children. Like that when I hear that, it's like it feels like arrogance, because then here we go as a parent again speaking for our children and their experiences and what they see through their own eyes. And so I think that's an ongoing question we have to ask ourselves the whole time you're raising your little ones, right? I have to check myself and say like I know my child, right? Like I know these two girls, I know these two women for who they are and all of their beauty and complexities and all of the things, but I can never make assumptions on their behalf. I can never speak for them. I can never say like I know all about what it means now to be a biracial person. I don't. And I think like that's one thing I would say about it. I think it's about the layers again. There's layers in parenting anyway. It's like, am I raising a boy, a girl, a non-binary child? Am I raising, and what does that person experience in the world because of these different identities? And balancing that with like how those different definitions build who they are as human beings. So like how am I fostering that in all the ways that I possibly can? I think like parenting is just so much about pulling what we want to impose onto our children, pulling that out, and really just like sitting in the different moments with them to help them make meaning, as we are also simultaneously trying to make meaning and questioning whether like, oh, am I going the right direction here with this? Like, am I teaching them the right thing? But the reality, if we talk about lessons, one big lesson is like, I just never really am sure of whether I'm doing the right thing or not. Like, I don't care how much of a psychological background I have, or if I had raised 10 children, in certain moments we're like, like, is this the best thing? And most of us do the best that we can, right? So I think like giving ourselves the grace to say like, okay, I am doing everything that I can with everything that I know about my child, and to really think about like what is the best way to support that particular individual. And then there's the whole other side of it where we talk about identity, and identity based on all these different factors, right? But then who is your child? Like, what is your own child's temperament? And like, so how do they see, like, I have two children, and one can have one had a really difficult time with like, oh, my hair is curly. That is so problematic for me. And one was like, my hair's so curly. And she like takes all the compliments, right? Versus like the next one, and with the next issue, it can be a little different where one child is more sensitive to something. And I always have to say, not sensitive in a negative way, right? Because people misunderstand what sensitivity means, but like really in tune to different aspects, and picking up on different cues where another child may miss that. And so even like what I was saying earlier about one of the lessons being awareness of self and how much we put onto our children, tuning that for each child and their temperament, their personality, and what their needs are. To summarize all of that, I think one of the lessons being like, we can't apply the same thing to every child.
Yeah, when you talk about that, I'm like, you're right. Like my older son identifies in so many different ways, but similarities than my younger son. And even the hair, like you said, one has very straight hair, one has more curly hair like mine. So there's all these different dynamics, but it doesn't make one less and with their races than the other. It's just like how they're processing it. And again, I think where they are older versus younger, that always plays a part on so many levels too. And they're just developing. So where your daughters are going to be in 20 years with their brain is fully developed, they're probably going to maybe come back. Like, let's have that conversation. Like when your your adult children are in their 30s, 40s, and you've had your time to think about the things that you did well, but maybe could have done better. Like, what things do you think you guys would come together to talk about, or would there be space for you to apologize for things as a parent to your adult children? And this is something as kids of immigrants don't ever get, or rarely get, is our parents apologizing to their adult children for things that they could have done better and these sorts of things.
It's something that I've thought about quite a bit. And already, because they're adults, hey, I'm sorry that I didn't express myself as much as I should have in front of you. I think there was a lot of suppression of emotions.
You talked about that in the previous episode too. Yeah.
And I think like that's a big one. And it's ironic because with my parents, like they never expressed their emotions. I mean, outside of anger, which was like really the only acceptable one, which in a lot of families is. I think that's the thing that I know, like right now, I have already apologized for, and like, but also hoping that because of that they nurture that within themselves and they learn to express themselves with other people. And 20 years from now, what else would I, probably a lot of things.
You're like, ask me then.
Yeah, that's another, I mean, that one zoomed to mind because I know that I have felt. I think another one, I'm thinking, these are such amazing questions.
Oh, okay, good. Because I'm like, are you, I'm sitting with psychologists. So I'm like, I hope I'm asking questions that make sense and are okay too. So I'm glad to hear that. Because
no, absolutely. Well,
I've gone rogue. I've left my notes and just gone rogue. So sometimes that's not a good thing. Sometimes that's a good thing. So
no, I love it because it's like, well, it's challenging for me because I'm the listener. So when I'm asked questions, I'm like, and like, I think there's a lot of therapists, like therapists talking to each other. Sorry, very quick side note. Therapists talking to each other as friends is like the most ridiculous thing because it's like, oh, how are you? Like, I'm good. How are you? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm good. How are you? It's like, can we just talk about how we're doing already? We're going to be there for the other person anyway. But I think in my mind, I had my own version of what strong meant based on what I was taught. And so I tried to live that out for my daughters in a way that just wasn't always awesome. It was like, oh, look at me, I'm working really hard. And it's like, oh, I'm so tired at the end of the night. But it's because I've been working so hard and, for you guys, because I love you guys. And it's like, I was like, ew, that's what I was taught. And it's such a broken system and it's really gross. And it's like all about like, it goes into that, like, it's not exactly transactional because I didn't say like, I'm doing this for you and you owe me, but I'm like, oh, I'm doing this out of love for you. And like, I'm working hard. Working hard will like get you outcomes, which like is not completely wrong. But I think the biggest thing, see, now you got me going because I'm like, what? I'm good,
go. I love it.
But I think not teaching them enough about rest. And I think that was really, if I could, and I have few regrets because I'm like, what are you going to do? Right? Like, this is where I am. But if I could go back, I think that's what I would teach them far better than I did. And I think for them being on both in both of their ethnic backgrounds, not being given the permission to rest. Right. And I mean, particularly in African American history, it's like slavery, you couldn't take a nap. You couldn't like, it's just heartbreaking. Right. And it's like how that even changes genetic expression and all of those things. If I had known that I was like perpetuating these patterns, with them, I would have done it much differently. But I was that parent who like would go to work and then I would go to school in the evening, then I'd come home and then I'd like, all right, guys, let's do homework. And then when they went to sleep, I would study and whatever. And like, so they always just kind of saw me doing stuff, working hard, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, although like I love being a psychologist. I thoroughly enjoyed like the schooling, the all of it. It's like I could have rested better. I could have modeled that better for them, and I could have encouraged them to do so better too. But
Yeah.
they were kind of like when they were younger, it was like, oh, like what sports? And you got to do sports because I wasn't allowed to do sports. My parents are like, you have to get your education, and that's it. And then you come home and you be super bored, and we're gonna, just like tell you everything you need to do, right? Like everything is so prescribed. So I'm like, oh, go have fun. And like, I mean, is it like the worst thing in the world? No, but I wish that I had implemented more like, hey, like you can do whatever you want right now. Like go and be free and enjoy your time. It doesn't have to be so structured. Yeah, I think that's a big one.
That is a big one. I think how you laid it out too, just, the epigenetics, how things are passed down to kids in terms of rest. And it's so rebellious. It's such a huge thing if you can combat that. And I think that's great advice for someone like me raising young people where I can turn the switch. And I actually read this too a little while ago that moms who take naps really support their children as they're growing their nervous system, which makes so much sense if you think about it, their anxiety, but even more so if your kids can see you napping, like if you're napping on the couch and these things. And it makes so much sense, especially for moms of color who also grew up in the conditioning world of when you said you're telling your kids, I'm working for you in these things, like I literally did this to my kid the other day where I'm like, oh, guess what? I washed your bedding for you. Like, what? He's like, thank you. And then right away it was like, oh, you know what? You don't actually need to thank me. I guess I'm telling you, but I guess the way I told you made it seem like I was looking for validation. And we grew up in that way where our moms did these things and we're like, I don't care. Like, why are you telling me this? But it's like passed down to, I got to work hard. I got to show you that this is how I find my worth, in the same way that I have to teach you your worth is transactional as well. And so it's a huge thing to overcome, but you're doing the work, you're writing the books, your social media presence, these things are so helpful, and you're full of so much knowledge to help others. Okay, maybe you had to suffer, but you're trying to help those of us that are, raising younger kids, or even the younger generation, for them to see, okay, we can make these changes as we grow as a community. I know as we start wrapping up, I do want to touch on, and we had said this in the beginning, just the greater community. So in our households, is there something that maybe lessons or something that stands out to you when raising your biracial kids, and the roles and responsibilities of other family members, whether it was on your partner's side or on your own side, and the responsibility and, that macro part of our household with our kids and understanding their races and those kinds of things? Anything come to mind in that area for you?
It's one big pattern that I notice and continue to notice in other families, but starting with mine, there was that idea, like I would hear my parents, or even on my in-laws side, there were a couple people who would say like, oh, that's how they do things, speaking about the other person's family, right? Like my family speaking on like, oh, that's how like Black people, blah, 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 blah. And that very quickly becomes an othering, which I was very, very opposed to. I was like, wait, like, no, like she's our baby. Or like at church, like there was a woman who was like, oh, come here and give me a hug. Like she said, come here and give me a hug to my daughter, and like grabbed her. And I was like, we give hugs. And I'm like, who is we? Like, it was like all Indian community church. And she's like, we give hugs. And like, she meant well, right? But like those nuanced ways that we talk about people of other ethnicities, and their little bitty children, like hearing all of this and filtering and understanding it. So I think like for families to understand, like, okay, now we are all family. We are all now biracial, ultimately, in our hearts and minds and how we see our children. If these children are our community's children, we all have to view things from a biracial lens. And like, how might that be impactful for this child? And so I think that was like it was a learning experience to not separate. We can talk about cultural factors, but like, how are things said makes all the difference. Like that's how they do it versus like asking questions again, as we were talking about, or like asking a child like what their experience is in a particular thing. That othering thing would come up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so we do have to be careful about that and what kind of meaning we're making and how we're framing different things, because those are the type of seemingly small things that cause a biracial adult or multiracial adults to say like, yeah, I never really felt like I fit in anywhere because the expectations on different sides were really, very opposed, or like I wasn't all of one thing. But the reality is none of us are all of anything, right? Like I am very American, I'm very Indian. I grew up in Latino neighborhoods and, in white neighborhoods. And like, it just, all of that, we take that with us. And so I think families, communities being like really aware of like how we're talking to multiracial children and about them and about cultures.
I think there's so much said there, and it's like a lot of our BIPOC communities, there's so much racism and misunderstanding amongst all of us, and yet we have so many similarities in terms of history and power dynamics, systemic issues. And so we're just always fighting to be at the top with the weight, and we say these things and we do these things in a way that harms our own community more than other communities. And it's always interesting how just simple words put together by like, oh, they do that way. And those are the in-betweens we keep talking about. You're right. That is what our kids take and process in the way that they do. They're smart, they're aware, and they hold on to that. And I think when our kids get to see the other community members, so their family from both sides getting together, whether it be at bigger events or a barbecue or a wedding, making that effort together, I think there is some healing in that and some bridging of that in between for the kids of like, oh, both things can literally exist in the same room today. This is how and we're not asking for perfection, but we're asking that our kids get to see that. And I know it's not possible for all. I know a lot of biracial kids grow up without their extended family because of the lack of support for their parents. And that's unfortunate that those people miss out on the kids' upbringing and those things. But there is a responsibility. And again, I'll keep saying it, there's a bigger responsibility for the white side. If there's white family involved with the other partner being of color, there's way more responsibility there because that power dynamic is already at the top no matter what. And these kids, they see that or the lack thereof or whatnot. So what, like for you, maybe some of these unspoken parts, like what are the conversations you feel, whether it's couples or their families or couples with their biracial kids, like avoid in the world of like raising these young people? Like what are the things that you see are being avoided, or maybe you even did, that you think could have been beneficial in helping the biracial kids and building their identity?
I think like calling out things that were just happening. And this one's hard. Like for instance, like if there's the difference in itself, like, oh, this part of the family is different. Like if we're thinking about like, the grandparents, right? They're already kind of like, oh, like, well, I don't know much about that culture. I don't know about, and so there's this wall that goes up, self-preservation, you want to call it, like just instinctually, like, oh, that person's different. So like leaning into those differences and talking about those differences is so important. rather than pretending like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, eating this food. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like that, I didn't expect it to be that way or whatever. It's all in these small acts where we're like, we're just putting it out there. We're putting out the fact that we don't know something, or that we're like wondering about something, that we're curious about something about the other person's culture. And that then like allows the child to know growing up, like let's say all the in-laws are having discussions openly about like, oh, I didn't know this about blah blah blah, or like, how does this work, or how do you do that, rather than pretend, or to just kind of like other people, even mentally kind of like, oh, they do that like that. Or I mean, people are gonna have differences, but really like embracing differences versus being afraid of them, because yes, differences are scary. Our brain itself, when we think that something is different, already creates this cascade of processes in the brain that like then have the amygdala or the fear response center really going, and then we are physiologically feeling like we're threatened, which is terrible because like these are human beings that we're talking about, right? But human beings of a different culture. But in our brains, we're like, oh no, this is dangerous. It's like, oh no, it's just a different type of food, or it's just a different way to pray, or it's just people can be so fearful, like you said, like completely disowning their families, completely not being involved. But when there are families that are present, it's like really like calling out those things like, oh, I don't know anything about this food. Can you tell me about it? And that's a beautiful way to come together.
Don't yuck
Oh,
someone else's yum.
yeah. Yes.
Like
That's,
we tell kids this to
that's
be respectful, but I've seen it so many times where it gets disrespected, and it's like, this is like someone's nourishment. It doesn't have to be yours, but like you said, be curious about it. Yeah, it is fear. I've seen that. I've seen that a lot, where it's fear of the accent of how people talk. It's fear of like privilege being taken over, like all these sorts of things over the years I've seen in my own experience of raising my kids. And I think ultimately it comes down to the bio parents, and like, how are you two going to come together and navigate this? If your side of
Mhm.
the family is being disruptive, then what's the thing to do about it? And I know you can't prepare for everything before you have kids, but as they come, like you said, not to hide or, put your head in the sand, but like be okay to say, like, what's the fear here? What's the worry here? Yeah.
And you
So,
make such a great point about like the bio parents stepping in. And I think that part is that can get so tricky because from looking at it from like family dynamics and like the psychological aspects of that, it's like you were raised by your parents, right? And so you're like, oh, I want to honor my parents, I want to respect what they have to say about whatever. Then you get into this interracial relationship, and that is challenged severely because they might not agree with a lot of what you've decided. Then come the children, and that's when you have to fiercely protect those little children from even your parents at times. I know there have been times where I've overheard my parents talking to the kids in a certain way, or like you make those corrections boldly because your parents are going to be okay. They're not, and people are really like, oh, I don't want to hurt my parents' feelings. I feel guilty about saying something. It's like the guilt that you're feeling is sacrificing the healthy development of your child, though. Like that's what you're sacrificing by not protecting these conversations that are being overheard. If you're not addressing them and saying, hey, that's inappropriate, or if I know I've had to like go to my parents' house and pick up the kids and say like, nope, like we're gonna have to talk about that before I bring them over again. And a lot of times they don't see it. It's they're just really ingrained, and they're grappling with like, oh, how dare you take
yep.
that power away that I had over you.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
you know, the, the reality with a lot of South Asian families is like kids are not like autonomous. They don't have a healthy sense of independence. It's like we're very enmeshed. And so now you have 3 generations of family, but you have little vulnerable children who need to be told, like, hey, you can protect yourself, even if you're having to do that with your grandparents. There are respectful ways to do that. And sometimes, depending on how egregious the thing is, it's like, you don't even have to worry about respect. You have to worry about separating yourself from things that don't feel safe.
Yeah, it's
That's,
so true.
yeah.
We're trying to change. We said this at the beginning too. There's parts of how each generation grows up that, okay, are great, and every generation can think they're the greatest generation ever, but they're not, because things are
Mhm.
evolving and things are growing, and so we have to learn how to kind of come up with what's happening. And today we have a lot of psychology and a lot of education among us that can help us teach and do things better, so that kids aren't growing up with abuse. Kids aren't growing up in ways that are going to impact their well-being. And I think that there's a lot in that, we let go as kids of immigrants. And then sometimes it's like, okay, you can't wait for that generation to understand. Like you said, it's a safety thing. And like for you and I, another intersection is we also work. Well, I worked, you are in the mental health field. So there's like this whole other sector that we're taught about what is, I mean, it's a Western lens, but the lines of what is abuse and what is not. And so
Right.
sometimes I feel learning that part for myself helped in providing consent, safety, all these kinds of things for my kids, but also confused a lot of the community, and maybe even my parents too, because it's like, no, you can't talk like that. We don't talk to our kids like that. We are open with this sort of thing. And I think, like you said earlier, it always ends up being fear, because it's like what I don't know, or what I'm not used to. And here on this platform, we really encourage being curious without it becoming a defense mechanism. But like, why are things in that way? What is that about? Is that harmful? I think you can usually see the range of harm from afar, and often it's not something about being harmful. It's trying to change part of a generation so that it's better, right? We keep saying we don't want to be surviving, we want to be thriving. And so we have to be willing to challenge some. And you had said this earlier, like asking a lot more of why. Why is it that we do this custom, and what's that about? Who is this benefiting? Because we didn't even touch, right? Like, I know we're talking about raising biracial kids, but there's that patriarchy, misogyny that all of our kids would have had their parents, your kids with the cultures they come from, my kids with the cultures they come from. There's a lot of that underlying that's brought us up as well. And so there's all these intersections. And so we're just like, where do I go? Where do I start?
A lot of lessons, and a lot of the curiosity just like really creates more curiosity, which is the beautiful thing. It's like, if we stay in a place of curiosity, we could just learn a lot and be able to support the people we love the best we can.
Yeah. And I think, where we started is maybe also where we come to an end too, is like, if we're going to be raising biracial kids, we have a responsibility to understand our roles as the parents and each other's communities, each other's cultures, and not avoiding that conversation or multiple along the way. Like, our kids deserve that. They, like you said, they're navigating a world we don't know, and we kind of made the choice to put them in that world. So we do owe them some sort of guidance, understanding, cushioning along the way, because they're going to put 2 and 2, 4 and 4, whatever it is, together on their own anyway. And wouldn't it be amazing for these kids to grow up like being honored and appreciating both of the communities, or the multiple communities that they come from, and say, look, a part of me is this parent and a part of me is that parent, and here I am, versus feeling the push-pull that a lot of young people that are biracial end up growing up with, or get told by the community, well, you look more white, so that's sort of where you are. You look more black, so you're just black. And it's like, okay, well, I have a whole different part of me too. So it's not so black and white to say literally and figuratively. So,
wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Add what you'd like at this point, and then I'll wrap up with middle fingers up, because I've kept you for a long time, and you're so kind. You're like willing to let me keep asking you. So I always
It's such an important conversation. Like, this is this is the thing with it, is like the more I talk to you, the more like I'm like, ooh, oh, and we should talk about this and that. And like when you just really, like, you talk about curiosity, like this is us being curious together. And I love that. I love that process. And it's just not only from a psychological perspective. I feel very much like, yes, mother to mother.
Yeah.
Like that's the beauty of it. But I think the hopefulness here is, in my experience, in my personal experience with raising two biracial girls, and with the work that I do as well, I've seen many well-adjusted biracial and multiracial adults who are like, hey, I'm not half anything or a quarter anything. I am this, and I'm this, and I'm this fully. I am all the things that I am fully. And that is such a beautiful place to come to after living through childhood, trying to navigate those things, and part of adulthood too, for most people. But yes, to see my daughters embrace, like, going all out for Indian weddings, and going to like the Little India here on the Vaughan in Chicago, and like really like loving all of that, and then celebrating with the Black side of the family, all of our customs on that side of the family, and our own version of like singing the birthday song, or celebrating like just beautiful traditions on both sides, just being like deeply appreciated by the girls, by us, by both sides of, and this is like ideal, where it comes to this place of like acceptance, right? And most definitely not saying all of the family members have accepted and embraced, but we are happy with like how our girls have embraced who they are. They're going back to self-awareness, to see like two young women who are secure in who they are as women, as two biracial women, and who are able to speak about it confidently. And of course, there are things that they question about their identity. We all do, for forever and ever and ever. It never stops. But to unapologetically be who they are, that is very, very possible. Despite all of the ways that I have made mistakes as a parent, as we all do, but the joy of seeing that with them and other biracial and multiracial adults, it's definitely attainable. So
you can go to bed with both eyes closed. That's a huge pat on both your backs over there, because it's a challenge in itself, raising kids, and we hope for the best, and we kind of have to also let these little beings make their own decisions along the way. And so to I hope your daughters know that, and to speak in the way that you have of them, that's amazing. And I think for them as well, to be able to grow up in a kind of environment that is a lot of learning and a lot of going back and healing. You guys sound like a very healing family, which I think is always a bonus when there's that kind of safety in a household where, we're supposed to make mistakes no matter what people say. They're important. They're part of our growth, our character building, our origin story. But to be able to go back and honor those mistakes and say, okay, whoever it is in the household I made, especially the adults, I didn't do this so well, and I've learned from it, and let's try this again or whatnot. So I think those kinds of things are what in general we want to shape our kids. But when we have the added piece of different races in there, I think, like we started at the beginning of like, what is self-worth? What is security? And it's so cute the way it's ended, because you shared how you see your daughters and how they've grown. And I think that right there is a definition of what I asked you at the beginning of like, how does this happen? So that's success. And now they get to kind of make their own bumps and errors along the way and add to that, Yeah.
And it wasn't easy for them living with a psychologist as a mom.
Oh, I bet.
that, and they're like, oh,
Oh, I
so
know.
there's all
I
that.
know.
And so they can talk about that for years.
I get it because I not a therapist, not a psychologist, but being in mental health, we talk about processing a lot. And I do a lot of like because of my own learnings in the last few years, I do a lot of like, well, I always start with, well, because society says. So my younger son, that's his like way of now joking with me. Any question he asks me, and he's like, oh, you're going to be like, wow, son, society would say. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing a good job because it's becoming annoying. So it means like it's sticking. He's getting it. He understands that there's a global aspect to what it means to be young men growing up, whether they are, brown and white or whatever in between. It's important. So I think a lot of today is like, okay, we need to hear our kids. We have to give our kids a space to make sense of their experiences as biracial kids, of like what that interaction meant to them, to build their critical thinking. We as the parents have to manage, and the external family members have to manage our own guilt and fear of the kids missing out or not getting something, and to not mistake that as love, to be in check of that. I think we have to also make space for identity and what that means as they are growing, and it's not an expectation, it's a process, and who they were at 5 is not going to be who they are at 15, and so on and so on. And what would you add? What else would you add to what we can say we summed up in what we talked about?
I think it all comes back to curiosity.
Yeah well said. Yeah,
we're human. When we take away all of the other factors, we're human. And I think if it's like the most difficult conversations, the most like opposing conversations, or the things that are most difficult to take in, it's like even then, like in a lot of cases, there's a bridge there because we're human, right? So for families where they're like, yeah, like I feel like it'll be impossible for me to accept, looking at it from like the in-law perspective, like it's going to be impossible for me to accept this person who is of a different whatever. It's like it's not hard to accept a human being into your family. And society says we have all of these different divisions between us, but what it comes down to is being curious about other human beings, right?
Yeah.
So
I can relate to that, and I would agree with that 100%. It's that's a mother-in-laws. That's a whole different conversation we could have too. And I think like we love these kids and all that, but I think that's not the be all end all. Like I hear a lot of what you're saying today when you talk about curiosity is awareness. Awareness in us, awareness in what's happening in the world, awareness in, instilling that in our kids. You mentioned that as adults, your kids are building that and have that sense. And that to me, self-awareness is like a superpower. If you can lock into that, understand that, and build that, it helps you in every scenario you walk into. So lack thereof that's the scary part. So let's end on a middle fingers up. What would you put your middle fingers up to today?
I would put my middle fingers up to willful ignorance today.
Ooh, what is that about? Tell us. Yeah.
So that's a good I really felt that.
Yeah, I did too.
It is choosing to stay ignorant. It is choosing not to be curious. It is choosing not to ask questions in loving ways, to learn and to expand who you are as a person.
It's a sad place to be, I think.
Yeah. Willfully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I support that. I like that. All right, my friend, any last words? I'll say that these conversations are door openers. We're just starting to have them as a community. And this is one of many. Like, we want to build off of all of these so people know where they can reach out to you. They know where they can reach out to me. But apart from that, last words are yours before we call it a day.
I just think just stay curious. That's it. Like, stay curious. And thank you so much for creating this space. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have these conversations, to like bring them all the way up to the surface because people are experiencing them, a lot of times it's like just below the surface, but there's this huge iceberg of hurt and emotions and questions around what do I do? What do I do about all of the things, identity, biracial relationships, parenting? Like, these are such amazing conversations. These are amazing topics that have to happen. So thank you.